Welcome to the Cultivating Business Growth podcast, bringing you bi-weekly discussions designed to help you grow your business and create the lifestyle you desire. Elevate your business with proven strategies from virtual CFOs, CPAs, and business advisors. We discuss real-world challenges solved with actionable steps that get you the results you need, both in business and building the life you deserve.
Welcome, and thank you for joining us for this next episode of Cultivating Business Growth, brought to you by Willow Virtual CFO. We are here talking about decision fatigue today and how that really does become a profit problem for your business. And I know it's not a new topic, decision fatigue, but I think a lot of topics either talk about it from maybe just why it's happening or the science behind it, which is great. I think it's good to understand the psychology and the why. But we're also relating this back to you as a business owner and why that can really impact your P&L. So by the end of this episode, our goal is to help you understand how that decision fatigue slowly erodes your profits, slows growth, increases leadership stress, and we're giving you a practical framework to help you reduce those daily decisions and protect your margins. So Jamie Staley, partner here at Willow Virtual CFO, CPA, thank you so much for joining us and helping us tackle decision fatigue and protect our margins as business owners.
I'm glad to be here, and I love this topic, and I've been there with everybody else. With sometimes you just are done with making decisions, and you need to have a way to frame it so that you can make good decisions still, even when you're not necessarily in the best frame of mind.
Yeah. And I think we've all been there too. Like we've all felt that exhaustion at the end of the day. We didn't work out. It's not like we ran 5 miles that day, but your brain is just tired because you've been asked so many different questions, or you've been responsible for big decisions that could change the tide of like, oh, we're going to go this direction or this direction. It's not like, what color shirt am I going to wear today? Which also does erode your decision-making ability, but it's just, you feel that exhaustion, and we want to do our best to try to avoid feeling that at the end of the day too.
Exactly.
So to start, let's define just briefly. We're not going to, like I said, we're not going into the science. We're not like psychologists or neurosurgeons here, but what is decision fatigue?
Yes. And I did a little bit of research, and I actually like yours better, Megan. So I'm going to go with your definition here. So decision fatigue is the mental exhaustion that happens after making too many decisions in a row. As your brain gets tired, the quality of your choices declines. You're more likely to avoid decisions or make impulsive choices or default to the easiest options rather than the best one. So I think that's true. I think sometimes you just want to pick something. And, I'm sure as a business owner, we've all done it. Sometimes you're just like, yep, we're just moving on. And depending on the type of decision it is, maybe that's not the worst case. If it's a small decision, that's fine. But I think what happens is as you make all those really small ones that aren't as impactful, then those big ones come in. And then you're like, I'm already exhausted and I barely wanted to make the last decision. How do we get through, how do we make sure we're not just delaying it, avoiding the situation or the question, putting time aside to just be like, hey, I am just going to think about this and just have a discussion about this. And we're just going to get everything out. I'm going to take a moment and think through it. So it's not easy to do, but obviously ideal in practice if we can kind of, create time to make those decisions. So I think we're going to talk a little bit more about how to make that happen later. But yeah, it's tough. There's lots of decisions as a business owner.
Yeah. And why do you think that it hits business owners harder than employees?
Well, the business owners are in charge of it all, right? They're responsible for everything, and they tend to operate without guardrails, right? We don't really always have a defined scope of what we're doing. We touch everything. We have a say of everything. Every decision funnels back to us. Higher the stakes, the decision impact is bigger. It could impact cash. It could be risk. It could be, success of the business. And we also, are tied, our identity is tied to the business as well. So the outcomes feel very personal. So we really want to touch this. And as a business owner, I can attest, sometimes we're making decisions that we're like, can we maybe delegate this to somebody else that could make a very good decision here? And they don't need the business owner perspective, but we feel, we've got some ego, right? We want to have a say. We want to give our 2 cents, and we want to help guide people too. I think we want, I think we want to make sure we're doing the best thing we can for the employee, for whatever that decision is. But employees, by contrast, they're working within a defined role. They escalate it to somebody else if there's something complicated. So they have that flexibility. And they also have a lot of systems in place for them to work through. When you're the owner, you are the system
right.
until you build something better.
Right. Yeah. And I think we also have the unique perspective too as moms and business owners. So we're getting that question. So, and I know there's other podcasts out there about decision fatigue as moms, but it's like that combo comes together. And 2, like when you said we're operating without guardrails, I feel like it is a lot like motherhood in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
Like you have these situations that come up where you're like, I haven't heard of this problem before, and B, don't know how to deal with it. So then you're going to experts in that area to figure out, hey, I don't want to make the wrong decision. So how do I figure out more about this and research and get help on deciding where to go? Because you don't have guardrails. You're like just figuring it out as you go and hoping that you're doing the right thing, right? So
exactly.
What are the kinds of decisions that you've seen drains leaders and business owners the most?
I think they're usually ones that are high frequency, more ambiguous, and financially impactful. So one thing is pricing exceptions. So when don't have structure around your pricing, it's easy to say, hey, can we discount this for this reason? Or should we match a competitor's pricing? Or should we give this away for less money? Because we don't have kind of that good structure. You make a lot of pricing exceptions and you're trying to be a nice person, right? But that being a nice person hits your bottom line, right? As we were talking, so you have to balance being nice and being, maybe wanting to give a discount. Doesn't mean you should never give a discount or you should never change your pricing. But we want to make sure we're doing it for the right reasons and not just, oh, this is how we always handle it. We always give this discount. We always, match this price. Does it still make sense for you? Are you still going to be profitable? Because if you're not going to be profitable when you change, that, revenue or cash coming in, it doesn't really make good business sense. And so you've got to make sure you're, matching that against, business operations and cash flow and profitability, because otherwise, you're giving it away, and I feel like people want to be kind and want to be flexible and generous. And that's great if you have the ability to do so. Not all business owners can, and not all, products or services that you're offering have that same ability. So you just need to be careful there. I think another one is hiring. Hiring decisions are tough because when to hire, who to hire, whether to replace or tolerate underperformance. And so timing can be really tricky there. If you hire someone too soon, you're paying for somebody that's really not benefiting you. If you wait too long, you may have very stressed out and overworked people. And that's not a great place to bring a new person in. From that perspective. Pricing, hiring, client issues can come up too. Scope creep, clients push the bar on what they should be getting. And we sometimes let them do that depending on, what types of services you have. That can be a problem. So you definitely could have some issues there. Conflict resolution with clients who are just, some of them are hard to work with. Some of them, just not as, good at collaborating as we hope when we bring some clients on. And so client issues can be really draining as well, because we don't want to lose clients, but we also, how do we handle those complexities if they're maybe not an ideal client?
Yeah. And ultimately, it does start to impact the business financially. So how have you seen this in your clients you've worked with, maybe even yourself, where you reach that point and you're just like, okay, this is impacting XYZ?
Yeah, it can be a ton of things. It could be slower approvals to getting things done, or getting proposals out the door, getting revenue coming in. So that delays your revenue because you're not really sure if it's the right fit and the project just kind of stalls. We also see emotional decisions can lead to margin drainage. So, again, giving discounts without a lot of structure or reasoning, over servicing clients and providing way more service than they were originally supposed to get.
Mm,
Underpricing. It's very common to underprice your services and feel like you shouldn't charge more. And that tends to be a problem. There's very few client services or clients that we work with that we don't discuss that. Hey, do we want to raise our prices? Like, we need to raise prices year after year. Inflation goes up. Everything else is costing you more as a business owner.
yeah.
So you just have to keep those things in mind. And if you don't do that, again, right to the bottom line. If
Yeah.
your expenses are going up, but your price out to the clients is not, that hits the bottom line for sure. Avoided decisions. So when you avoid those decisions because you can't make them, that means, you've got poor performers that you still keep because you can't make the decision to let them go. I feel like a lot of people are in that bucket. I know we like to give people like 3 big chances, and usually by the end we're like, okay, I'm ready to let this person go. It is not working out anymore. And so I
Yeah.
feel like we tend to push that off or give, too much credence. I definitely think I can't remember who talked about this. I'm sure it's someone famous out there, but it's fire quickly and hire slowly. And I
Mm,
feel like we tend to fire slowly. I feel like that's usually not the best interest of the business or ourselves. I think it makes us feel better because we know by the time we're at the 3rd strike that
yeah.
we're like, yep, there's no doubt here. Like
You
this,
want to
this
give the
is it.
benefit of the doubt, and you're trying to give people chances and make sure that, like,
Exactly.
is there a hole in my communicate? Like, there's already so many psychological things. I think that as a business owner, you want to make sure you're taking care of people, or at least most business owners,
Yes.
right? Like,
Yes.
his profit's important, but so are people. So
Right.
it is something that I think we tend to fall into just naturally.
Yeah. But then the delay of that is that person's not doing a great job. You're having to step in as either a business owner, somebody else has to take over. And it just becomes, again, to your bottom line. You could have somebody who's efficient, getting it done, not an issue. You're having 0 conversations about it with anybody taking up your time. Those
Yeah,
are the
because it's
things
more
that you
than
don't
just the
see.
inefficiency of that employee, right? Like you said, you're
Exactly.
having meetings about it. You're having to document
Hmm.
it. You're
The
having your
time.
HR person, or what, like, it's so many other things that it's the morale of the other employees around that person. And like you said, that can stack on top of, if you have one bad employee, it can create, oh, well, why am I trying so hard if
Right.
they still have a job? And so I'm going to lower my, and then the whole department is like that pretty soon. So
Exactly.
yeah.
It becomes pervasive, and it sucks up your time and your energy, right? It's not just your
Yep.
time. It's your brain space. It's your stress levels. It's a lot
Yeah.
of things. So,
Yeah.
and that's what a lot of these decision fatigue issues, where they come into play.
Totally. So now let's shift and talk about how they actually show up in the numbers, like on your P&L, on a financial statement. When you're looking at it from the CPA side, how are you recognizing that maybe in a client where you're like, "Ooh, hey, are you
Right.
experiencing
And
maybe some
yeah, I
operational things
mean,
here?"
you definitely want to review your financials and look at things like gross margin for a client, right? How much money are you spending? And you want to do it regularly, especially if it's a service-based business, because the amount of time you're putting in may change from month to month or quarter to quarter.
Mm,
So you want to look at that margin and make sure. There's always times that are more busy for some clients, for beginning of the year, for instance, we've got final financials for the year end, we've got tax returns. We always know here we're a lot busier at the beginning of the year. So we take that into account because it kind of spreads out throughout the rest of the year. But you want to look at that on a at least quarterly basis, I would say, to make sure you can look and see how you're performing. Because maybe when you bring on a new client, you're doing great. But 6 months, a year, 2 years later, you're realizing the costs are starting to creep up. You're not getting as much from your price perspective, and you're not getting as much margin. So I definitely keep an eye on that. Look at payroll. Gradual increases without proportional additional revenue could be a problem. So if your payroll's going up, but you're not actually making more money, we need to address that as well. That could be caused by late hiring, burnout, turnover, having to rehire people. And also if you have, on the flip side, early hiring, so you try to bring somebody in early, but then you have underutilized labor because you really don't have work for them to do. And then that can become a problem. And again, more cost and not any output for you on the revenue side.
Right.
Client churn can be a problem if you're making poor decisions and not bringing on the right clients. So you got to really think about who to keep and who to fire. Like, I think we just recently did an episode on how to fire a client. So that is not a fun topic, but something that sometimes happens. And it's just, if you get to a place where your peace of mind or your stress levels are just too high, sometimes it is the best decision to let go of a client. Because otherwise you're retaining low margin clients, or you're keeping too much stress for yourself. And that's not good for you and not helping you with your decision fatigue at all.
Yeah. And if that just struck a chord for you, it's episode 181. So go back and listen to that one, because we walk through some good steps on how to fire a client if you felt any of that pain, as Jamie was touching on that too, because I know that can be tricky and kind of hard to navigate how to do that. So now let's dive into the how to start relieving ourselves of this decision fatigue. What are some strategies that you've seen that have been helpful, or that you've recommended and seen a turnaround?
Okay, so I'm going to put these into a couple of categories: eliminate, automate, and elevate. So first, you want to eliminate some of these decisions that you're having to make, right? Do you need to be the one making the decision? What are the things you do need to be deciding in, and what do you not? Creating some standardization, things like standard pricing rules or approval thresholds, kind of gives your team a little bit more authority to handle things without having to ask you. Making that just trying to eliminate the things that have to go to the owner, right? Can we put in place some things that are going to stop that? We have an operational, person that can handle that question, and they get the authority to make that decision up to, if there's dollar amounts, a threshold, $5,000, they can make, the decision. Anything over that, we need to bring to the owner, because it starts to get more material and more impactful. Things like that can help you. And you have to decide for yourself, what are those things? What are those thresholds? But think through, I don't need to make this decision. I can let somebody else make that decision, and, be able to delegate so that you're not the only one who has to make that decision, and you have team, hopefully, to help you there. So one is to eliminate some decisions if you can, or as many as you can. Second is automate. So systematize and repeat decisions. So things that come up over and over. If you have recurring billing, if you have, hiring scorecards, how can you automate the process so there's less you having to figure it out every time, right? Here's our hiring scorecard. I don't have to figure out if I should hire this person. We're going to rank all these specific things we decided. And it doesn't have to be super detailed, right? It could be, hey, we look at 4 or 5 categories, and we base, these are the things we're looking at. Here's our scale of 1 to 5, 1 to 10. We rate them. We come up with a number. You can always have a intangible, hey, there's also some intangibles I just want to put in there. But what can you automate to help eliminate you having to make lots of decisions over and over? And then elevate. So reserve energy for high impact decisions. So making sure the owner level decisions are limited to the higher level things, such as strategy, how you're using capital, what is the next move for the business, what's the next, strategic venture the company's going to take. or any kind of key leadership hires. So if everything feels really important, then nothing is really prioritized. And so that's where the owners get kind of sucked in, right? Like everything feels super important. Everything needs my thoughts and my process, but then you start to lose, hey, what value do I have, and like what am I really wanting to like spend my time on, spend my decision brain power on? Those,
Right.
if we can keep it into that respect, then you have less stress on your decisions. You have more time and more brain space. But when you make every single little decision, you start to realize, they all seem really important, but is it more
Yeah, you're
important to
giving them all
hire
the same.
another partner versus should we buy this, product over here that's going to help everybody, and, somebody else can help you make that decision.
Yeah. Which printer do we get? Like,
Right. Exactly.
All right. So we have the 3 buckets. We have eliminate, automate, and elevate, correct?
Yes.
And as we dive a little deeper into building some kind of framework or architecture for those decisions, you got into a little bit with some of the thresholds, but I think it's worth breaking that down just a little further potentially. And I think that would probably count as one of the decision filters, but maybe you could give us another example or talk a little deeper into that. But what is a decision filter, and how does that help in building an architecture that helps eliminate this pressure off of you?
Yeah. So I think a decision filter is a structured framework that screens decisions before they reach the owner. So they are trying to help enforce consistency, speed, and financial discipline. So kind of as we talked about, we talked about how important it is if we have kind of a standard set, like if we come up with thresholds for, that director of operations, they can spend up to X dollars. And that gives me, I'm comfortable giving them that amount, whatever that dollar amount is, even if it's small at first, start somewhere and
Yeah.
say, hey, you can
Build the
handle all of
trust
these
that
things.
way.
Yes. Because I think that trust has to start, we want to make sure they're going to do what we want them to do, but we got to start delegating and trusting our team. And so I would definitely start with that. That will help things get done. That will help with the financial discipline. That person hopefully has some financial discipline, will ask questions, will be like, this does seem too expensive. I do think it's important we talk about it. So we really want to look at those types of things. I think the decisions that should require, some additional data first, there are definitely things that you have to have. Hiring. Do you have an HR person that can help with the hiring first couple of steps, right? And bring you in once they've screened the person, they've met the person, they were on time, they qualify based on all the technical things you need. That's when you spend some time with that person, right? Getting someone to kind of help you pre-screen, I think can really help. Coming up with a pricing structure so that you don't have to figure it out every time. Here's how we, work. Base 1, base 2, base 3. How do we want to structure that? That's why a lot of people have the kind of those three levels. They have a small, medium, large. The large, you get everything. It's, the best. It's more expensive. The base model is, hey, we do the thing we do, and that's it. There's nothing extra, no bells and whistles.
Right.
So kind of creating structure and pricing around that to help you be able to talk to that prospect and talk to them about why it's important. Making sure those numbers align with the margins you need and that they are consistent with what you need to charge. So that's really important as well. Major expenses should definitely be discussed. If you're doing a system implementation change, that might require a team of people looking at different options and making some decisions, and then presenting to the owners, hey, we've gone through these 4 or 5 things, different systems. We're recommending this system. Here's why. So really trying to, again, delegate, get input from the team that you have so that you can make those decisions. And trying to create some kind of dashboards would be really helpful. There's a lot of systems out there, but they can help you reduce reactivity, because a lot of people were just making a decision like our gut decision. A lot of times our gut is right, I've noticed in working with lots of business owners. But that's not necessarily the best way to make the decision overall, right? It's nice to have some things to support. Why are we making this change? I think our team can be more efficient. It's going to save them time so they can do more valuable work for our clients. Looking at revenue per employee, gross margin by client, or gross margin by service line, depending on how you work. Looking at utilization rates. Kind of creating those dashboards so you can have a sense for how well you are doing can really help, again, eliminate the needs to make lots of different decisions. We can confirm that we do have good gross margins. We don't need to raise the prices. I'm not going to discount anymore because I feel like the margins I'm seeing is what we need. We don't want those to be reduced. Looking at pipeline versus your capacity. So creating dashboards for the things that make sense for your business and keeping an eye on those statistics can really help giving you visibility into those areas, and that reduces your guesswork.
Yeah, that's nice to have.
Yes.
And lastly, I think it would be nice to have some kind of framework to hand over to, your managers that you're saying, hey, you have this threshold up to this amount, but it's hard to just like trust somebody. I feel like my anxiety, I'm getting sweaty hands just thinking about like, okay, here, take $500 and just make decisions. I trust you, which like at a certain point you kind of have to do, right? But once you've handed the decision-making power over to a manager, what are some questions that you could give them to empower them to make those decisions without you, or vice versa, know when it's maybe time to loop you in?
That is a good question. And I think there's some kind of filters we want to ask ourselves. So before any owner or any decision reaches the owner, we want to think through a few things. First, is it reversible? So, right, we don't want to be doing anything that's not reversible, maybe even at a smaller level, because that could, have some, compounding effects down the line. So is this reversible? If it's something you can purchase and you can return because it didn't work out, obviously less of a risk. Is this above our financial threshold? So I've given a threshold. If it's above the financial threshold, yes, we need to talk to the owner. No, then I should be able to go ahead and make sure. Does it align with our 12-month plan? So a lot of businesses kind of have that strategy at the very beginning of the year and say, hey, this is what our plan is for the year. Is this purchase or item or decision in relations to the 12-month plan? And I can point to, oh, here's one of the key areas we are going to do, and we need XYZ to start to accomplish that. That makes it easier for you to feel comfort, like the owner's not going to have a problem. They laid out a 12-month plan. I am making decisions to move us in that direction.
Yeah.
And then, is this emotional or strategic? We want to make sure decisions aren't just made emotionally. We want to make sure they're thought of in the long-term value and basis for the company. Can this be something that's going to help us not just today, but in 6 months, in 12 months, in 2 years? Is this going to have an impact? And if so, is it, again, aligned with our plans and goals? If it fails the filters, you should definitely talk to the owner and make sure they have some additional input on them. But if they are, within the filters and they're making sense and they jive, then you have the authority to go ahead and move forward with that decision.
Yeah. And each of your managers could utilize that bucket system too. The eliminate, automate, elevate too,
Yes.
As they're working through their decision filtering, can they automate things, or can they drop things down to some employees perhaps, or, so I think empowering each level of employee that you have working at your company with these tools can help everybody try to manage decision fatigue in a way that is more healthy mentally, better profit-wise for the business, and just overall, it puts everybody in a better spot. So as we wrap up our episode for today, do you have anything that you'd like to leave listeners with?
I think you sort of summarized it best, but I'm going to repeat it because I think it's helpful to repeat. Is just kind of going through that categories of the eliminate, automate, and elevate. If you can eliminate a few decisions this week, that would help your life. If you can automate a couple of things that you know that's happening all the time, how can we make this a more streamlined process so it's not a decision someone has to make? It's just a process we take.
Yeah.
And then elevate. Make sure as the business owner, you're thinking high level, you're working on your business, not just in your business, so that you're freed up to make the good decisions when those really important those important decisions cross your desk. You have space for that in your head. You have, ability. You're not stressed. You're not overwhelmed. And so these are all very difficult in practice. We understand and know that. So it's a goal to kind of get to this place. As I talk through all these things, I think, we need to work on that more too. So
Yeah.
you're not alone. These are things that all business owners are struggling with. But if we can take just a few small steps now, that can really help with our decision fatigue overall.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for going over that and helping us save our mental space and mental health as business owners, as mothers, as wives, as fathers, husbands, all the things, all the hats that we're wearing as we try to run businesses and grow and create healthy environments for everybody too. So I appreciate it.
Yes, of course.
Keep that momentum going, and we will see you next time.